welcome to today's OZ Pitch Day afternoon panel. This is a preview of OZ 2.0, and I'm joined by two industry-leading experts. Catherine Lyons is Senior Director of Policy and Coalitions at the Economic Innovation Group. Catherine, great to see you. And Jason Watkins is a partner in the Metro Atlanta office of Novogradac and Company, and he's also the chairman of the Novogradac Opportunity Zones Working Group, and also chairman of the upcoming Novogradac OZ Summit, which is taking place in Las Vegas on December 3rd, just a few weeks from today. Catherine and Jason, quick mic check. How are both of you doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing great, Jimmy. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see both of you as well. Well, this is all about OZ 2.0. And for the vast majority of the presentations we're seeing today, they're soliciting investors right now for OZ1 projects, but we have had quite a few questions about what's coming up next. What is the OZ 2.0 era going to look like? Wait, when does it go into effect? Wait, what are the benefits? All that good stuff. Catherine, I'm going to turn to you first. Can you give us a quick overview? What the heck is OZ 2.0? How did it come about? What are the tax benefits that are going to be available to investors, and when? Maybe just the quick elevator pitch on OZ 2.0.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed this summer, opportunity zones were made a permanent part of the tax code. So that is a major kind of victory in terms of having clarity and certainty for investors, for fund managers, and certainly for communities as well that are chosen as opportunity zones. And so essentially, OZ 2.0 is the next phase of the policy as we kind of phase and transition out of the sort of OZ experiment and into kind of a phase of permanency, which is great. Just to kind of quickly recap some of the changes and what we expect and when this all will take place. Essentially, the kind of main benefits are still there. You still get a deferral on your taxes. You still get a step up in basis if you hold for a certain number of years, and you still get that permanent exclusion on any appreciation of your taxes, or rather permanent exclusion on your taxes from any appreciation on your OZ investment. But there's a few kind of key changes within the structure of those benefits. First is that the deferral period is now a rolling deferral based on the time to the date of investment and a standard 5 years. So that there's no backstop date like we have right now, with 2026 being that for 1.0, that will no longer exist in 2.0, and instead we'll have that rolling 5-year deferral. If you hold that investment for 5 years, you would get a standard 10% step up in basis benefit alongside that. It's different for rural investments. We'll get to that, I think, in maybe a little bit later. And then the permanent exclusion ultimately stays the same. You have to hold your OZ investment for 10 years. If you do that, you don't have to pay taxes, on any appreciation or any gains on that investment. That all goes into effect essentially January 1st, 2027. That's also when the new map will come into effect. So while the OZ incentive is permanent, the map will consistently change. Every 10 years, there will be a revisitation of the map. Governors will have the opportunity to kind of relook at places that are eligible based on updated data and choose new eligible zones. 25% of their low-income census tracts or the eligible places that census tracts that are available. So that is the kind of very quick and dirty. There's a lot more sort of nuances in between there. And we could, the one other thing that I have failed to mention is that there are really stronger benefits for rural investments. And so some of those, the major one is that standard 10% step up in basis is tripled to 30% for projects that exist in rural opportunity zones. We can maybe get into some of those definitions a little bit later.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great setting of the table, Catherine. Really appreciate it. That's a great overview of what's coming in the OZ 2.0 era. By the way, I do want to save a few minutes toward the end of our panel discussion today for live Q&A. So if you have any questions about opportunity zones or particularly about this new OZ 2.0 era, fire away in the Q&A module. Just hit that Q&A icon in your Zoom toolbar. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can shortly. But let's spend the next 15 or 20 minutes kind of taking a deep dive into some of those issues, some of those new features that you pointed out. We'll kind of peel those layers back one by one. Jason, I want to turn to you next, though. We're in this interesting period of time where OZ 1.0 is winding down. OZ 2.0, there's a lot of excitement about it. What are you hearing and seeing most from a lot of the clients that you advise, whether they are investors looking to defer gains into an opportunity zone vehicle, or maybe you're hearing from some qualified opportunity fund managers? What are some of the conversations that you've been having lately about OZ 1.0 expiring, OZ 2.0 getting underway shortly, and what kind of excitement have you captured within your practice at Novogradac?
Sure. The questions are sort of primarily centered around a couple of different topics. One is the transition and how do projects that are ongoing continue to qualify as the zones that they're in expire, as well as how can investors take advantage of that January 1st, 2027 increase in the benefits that are available for an investor that can wait until then. So that a lot of questions around that. And we don't have a lot of answers yet. Our Opportunity Zones Working Group that you mentioned earlier, we submitted a letter to Treasury a couple of weeks ago with recommendations, a lengthy list of recommendations, particularly around this transition from Oz 1.0 to Oz 2.0 and the expiration of the original OZ designations, and then how that transitions to the new designation. So we get a lot of those. We're getting a lot of questions around rural. Catherine mentioned the additional benefits. So the benefits that are available is that first, and the biggest one is that for investors, that again, this only applies for investments that happen January 1st, 2027 or later. But after that 5-year deferral period, a normal, we'll say OZ investment, 10% of that originally deferred gain becomes tax-free. That's what that basis step up means. But if the investments are into a qualified rural opportunity fund, then it triples to 30%. So after 5 years of deferral, then 30% of the originally deferred gain becomes tax-free. And then you continue on with your OZ investments. So that's a big benefit for investors that are now starting to look at these rural areas a little harder. We know from the data that's been out that rural areas were kind of underrepresented as far as how much investment dollars went into those compared to urban areas. So, this was an attempt, I think, to change that a little bit, and I think it might be successful based on the amount of information requests that we're getting from all sorts of people who never really had a rural investment strategy before. And then the second benefit that's available, there's a reduced substantial improvement test. I don't want to get too nerdy here, but typically if you buy a used property that's been used by another taxpayer in a zone, and traditionally you had to double your basis with improvements once you acquire that property for it to qualify. But if the property is located in a rural area, that's halved, and that's actually in effect now. That went into effect upon enactment. So a lot of interest around that too, because suddenly all these projects that wouldn't previously have worked or wouldn't previously have penciled now are starting to look like they might.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks for the comments there, Jason. Actually wanted to take a moment now to share on my screen. This is a map that I have on my website, opportunityzones.com/map. Recently updated map. The IRS actually made a pretty big update to the OZ 1.0 map. They actually specified explicitly which of the current 8,764 designated opportunity zones qualify as rural. I'll just kind of zoom in on where I'm located here in the DFW Metroplex. The blue zones are non-rural zones located in urban or suburban areas. But then these orange zones, a little bit outside of Fort Worth here, looking south, a little bit outside of Dallas here, looking south. These orange zones are designated as rural opportunity zones now. So that reduced substantial improvement requirement that Jason just alluded to is not available in these blue zones located in metro centers, but they are available in these orange areas located outside of major cities. Catherine, Jason said something interesting a moment ago about how he's seeing more interest in doing rural deals potentially. What are you seeing and hearing, or what do you expect might come about as a result of these enhanced rural benefits? Do you think we'll see a lot more activity in rural areas taking advantage of the opportunity zone incentives starting in 2027?
Yeah, I think we're also hearing a lot of interest. And as we're talking actually to a lot of states, right now we've been engaging a lot with governor's offices or the agencies that are have been tasked or likely will be tasked with with the role and responsibility of helping governors ultimately choose and select their opportunity zones and submitting those to Treasury. We are emphasizing, or certainly like letting them know that there is an added benefit and a stronger benefit for rural places in case that kind of helps align with some of their current vision for what they want OZs to accomplish for their communities. If they perhaps already have kind of a rural economic development strategy, thinking through how OZs potentially could layer on, to catalyze additional investment and attract more investment to those places, that makes sense. I will say that, this isn't going to necessarily be a silver bullet for rural, and I think we should be very, cautious or kind of conservative in our sort of estimates here. There's still a lot of infrastructure challenges. There's a lot of, kind of challenges that are unique to rural that certainly we hope OZs and certainly the congressional, sponsors here, their intent in sort of strengthening the program for rural was definitely to sort of help those projects pencil that otherwise might be very challenging to do so because of lack of infrastructure or other issues that are sort of a unique challenge in rural places. The hope is certainly that, that'll help some of these projects get over the finish line. But I think we also have to be mindful that those challenges will still persist, whether they are OZs or not. And so it'll be interesting to see, what ends up happening in the market here. But agree that there's definitely a big emphasis on rural and therefore certainly an increased interest in these communities. The other thing is that the definition is it's pretty wide reaching. I mean, it is, and I'm looking over on my other screen here to actually kind of quote it from the IRS, but a rural area means any area other than a city or town with a population greater than 50,000, and any urbanized area contiguous and adjacent to a city or a town with a population greater than 50,000. Ultimately, what that means for the 1.0 map, at least, is that's about 38% of the opportunity zones. That's a pretty significant, amount of zones that ultimately qualify as entirely rural. So I think that definition is quite broad, I think, in their approach to how they define rural. And so that could also lead to a lot of, communities that, again, are kind of not, there's something going on there, right? Like these are places kind of on the outskirts of these cities. And so therefore could potentially be really ripe for investment. And we've seen a lot of types of investments into, industrial parks, kind of right in between on a thoroughfare, kind of in a rural place, but in between, two cities or sort of on a main hub line and, various other kind of industrial commercial use cases. So I think it could be really interesting to see what ultimately happens, especially in some of these places that are somewhat close to metro areas.
Yeah, and as I mentioned a moment ago, those rural zones have already been defined for the current map, the OZ 1.0 map. The reason why they bothered to do that is because one of the new OZ 2.0 benefits is already kicked in, that reduced substantial improvement requirement. That 30% basis step up, that tripling of the basis step up for rural investments, that actually doesn't kick in until January 1, 2027. Any investment that comes into a QOF prior to that date, before the end of 2026, is subject to the OZ 1.0 benefits, and you only get a deferral until 2026, and you are not eligible as of 2022 for any basis step up benefit. So January 1, 2027 is when all of the OZ 2.0 benefits go into effect. But I did share a moment ago on my screen that map of the current tracks that are designated as rural for the purposes primarily right now, at least, for achieving that substantial improvement, that reduced substantial improvement benefit. Jason, turning back to you now, your group, Novogradac and Company, produced a map of where you expect the new OZ 2.0 tracks to be, or at least I should say, which tracks you expect are likely going to be eligible. And Catherine, I know your group at EIG also put together a map.
Yep.
I picked Novogradac's because theirs had a little more info on the rural aspect.
Right. Yeah.
Yours was first. Theirs has a little bit more data on it. So plus it's time to hear from Jason. So Jason,
Yeah.
help me out here with this map. What can you tell me about this map? I'm going to zoom in again on where I currently am in the DFW area. What the heck are we looking at here? And can you caveat what's the data that you're using right now?
Right. So the data that's used to put this together is American Community Survey data that covers a 5-year period from 2019 to 2023. That's currently the most recently available census data. Uh, right now, December 11th is supposed to be the drop date for the 2020 to 2024 ACS data. We suspect that that will likely be the data set that will be used to give governors the full population of eligible census tracts that then they can then go through and nominate their 25%. So what you see here on our map is based on that data, we're identifying census tracts that are likely going to be eligible, and then whether those census tracts are rural or not, that's based on the color coding you can see over there. So in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, everything is urban. And as you start to get outside of it, you have these green areas. So purple means that it's eligible for designation. It's likely going to not be rural. Green means it's eligible, and it likely will be rural. There are a handful of census tracts that are zero population, or for some reason there's no data available yet in that particular set of ACS data. But you can look at these, you can see, thank you for zooming in. So you can see why it's eligible. There are 2 ways that a census tract can be eligible, down from 3, which was in the first round. So in the first round, you had to have at least 20% poverty, or you had to have less than 80% of the area-wide median income. And then governors were allowed to nominate 5% of their census tracts could be not themselves low-income communities, but were in fact contiguous with a low-income community. So there were some rules around that. That ability to nominate and designate the contiguous census tracts went away. And then also the area median income threshold is reduced from 80% to 70%. So what the result is that there's currently 8,764 opportunity zones. Best estimates are there will be 25 to 30% fewer zones because of this more stringent eligibility requirement. There will be fewer zones as part of the overall population. The same 25% remains, so there will be fewer opportunity zones as that new set goes into effect January 1st, 2027. It is important to remember that the opportunity zones 1.0 tracks actually do stay in place until the end of 2028. So for a 2-year period, we expect there to be 2 overlapping sets of opportunity zones. You can see those as well on our map. If you click under map overlays, you can click on current opportunity zones. That'll populate those. Those also, similar to Jemmy's map, do identify which ones are rural and which ones aren't. You can click on any census tract. You can look up in the location box. You can type in any address and really zoom in to see what census tract that address is located in. So lots of good information is available for free on our website. I'll post this now into the chat. This is a link to our map.
Perfect. I was about to do it.
That went to the host and the panelists. I'll send it out to everybody.
Yeah, send it to everybody. Good stuff. Thanks for walking us through that, Jason. So this is, again, this is all preliminary data right now. And not all of these will be designated as opportunity zones. This is by no means finalized. Only about 25% of these purple and green shaded regions will be designated as opportunity zones when all is said and done. The designation period officially gets underway July 1 of next year and runs for a period of 90 days, extendable by 30. So in practicality, it's a 120-day designation period that every state has to nominate their OZ 2.0 eligible census tracts to the Treasury Department. I should also mention that the mayor of Washington, D.C. gets to nominate census tracts in the District of Columbia, and all of the governors and executives of the overseas territories, perhaps most notably Puerto Rico, will get to designate up to 25% of their eligible census tracts as opportunity zones as well. Catherine, what's already underway, though? I mentioned that the designation period officially begins July 1, but I suspect that a lot of lobbying has already begun in earnest. What are you hearing from different community leaders, different states, different developers who are trying to figure out this OZ 2.0 designating period that we're about to enter into next year?
Sure. We definitely know that. I mean, we are certainly operating with the benefit of governor's offices now knowing what OZs are, which they did not necessarily when this was first passed, at the end of 2017. And in many cases, we had to sort of call around in early 2018 to make sure people knew about this, 8-page provision in a very lengthy tax bill, and knew that they were already on the clock, for delivering their selections within that 90-day period. It was, a real all hands on deck kind of hustle. But again, now we are kind of operating with a lot more information, a lot better understanding about the policy. And so we've already been fielding a lot of inquiries and incoming from governor's offices or from, state and local policymakers. We've hosted webinars. We've, worked with the National Governors Association on webinars. And so we are actively trying to get the word out to make sure that, people are not waiting until July 1st, to have those conversations. If we're waiting until July 1st, it's too late. And we also don't need to wait that long because we should have a good sense, as Jason just described. We should have a pretty good sense of, which places are going to be eligible as of December, essentially as of next month. Even if Treasury, takes a little longer to formally kind of share that authoritative list of eligible places, Novogradac and EIG can update our maps really quickly, once that next round of the ACS comes out. So, that should give the states a pretty clear picture of what's available. And I think many of which are already aware of that opportunity, of those timelines, and getting started. We are coming out with a guidance for governors document likely next week. Which will be a really, I think, very helpful resource, for state and local policymakers to understand what really worked well in 1.0, what places did a particularly good job on their selection process, what that yielded in terms of, investment, the scope and scale, across the state. And so we're trying to kind of distill that into a nice, helpful document and resource, for those, for those offices. But there's going to be a lot of information in there that'll be practical for a broader audience as well. So we'll be sure to share it with you, Jimmy, to share with your group, when that's out, again, hopefully before the Thanksgiving holiday. And again, in anticipation of that new data coming out shortly thereafter, and hopefully allowing states to really hit the ground running once we have that clarity of the data, and can really take the next 6 months or so, even prior to that statutory kind of determination period, to make some of their selections, or really think about what and how do they want OZs to accomplish, and how can they make this policy really effective in accomplishing some of their goals, for these underserved communities, that maybe are on the tipping point of revitalization, and OZs can really help them get there. So, yeah, we're excited. And we know a lot of states are already thinking about this, and hopefully we can help, put out some additional resources to further inform their thinking.
It's a really exciting time. We're on the cusp of this whole brand new era of OZ 2.0, which is going to really get going the second half of next year. It's already begun in some ways. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Catherine and her colleague Kenan Fikri are going to be joining our OZ Insiders Mastermind session next month on Monday, December 8th. You can learn more about that session. It's all going to be all about how to lobby for OZ 2.0 designation. I'm sure she'll be bringing a lot of resources that she just mentioned a moment ago to that discussion. You can learn more about that at ozinsiders.com. We've got a few minutes left. Running a few minutes behind schedule. I want to make sure we've got enough time to answer at least a couple questions here. Lewis and Natalie with Capital Square, I see you in the attendee list there. We're going to get to you just a couple minutes late here, but we'll give you the full allotment of your time. So just bear with us for a moment. Thank you very much. I had a few questions here that I wanted to answer. Sarah, first of all, and a few others asked, can you put a link to the new OZ map in the chat? So recently, Jason just posted a link to his map. I saw that somebody else, looks like Gavin, posted a link to both my map and the Novogradac map. So thank you very much for that. I had a question from Brad Brad Malotsky for Catherine. I mentioned a moment ago, EIG came out with their map of the potential OZ 2.0 census tracts right away. I think you guys were first to get that map out. That was awesome. And then Novogradac came in a week or two later with their map that also showed some of the rural areas. Brad wants to know, is there a big difference between that EIG map that was published a while ago showing indicative zones and the Novogradac mapping? I don't think there should be.
No, there, and I think we checked this even before we all published, like we have the same information. So it's just maybe displayed a little, like slightly differently with different colors, but all the information, should be the same there. And the rural overlay, which I think we both have on our 2.0, or our, potential eligibility maps for 2.0. We anticipate, and we kind of made the assumptions, what turned out to be the correct assumptions, and kind of interpreting the rural definition. IRS confirmed that, for 1.0. So we anticipate that same definition will be applied to 2.0. And so hopefully like those rural overlays that we both have on our 2.0 eligibility map should hold as well. So again, we anticipate that we'll get confirmation from the agency on that, hopefully within the next couple months.
Perfect. Let's see, another question here. Let's see, should metros be concerned about losing tracts in OZ 2.0 because governors may want to focus more on rural zones? For example, if my metro area has 10 tracts that are eligible in OZ 2.0, could the governor decide to only elect 5 of them so they can choose 5 more rural tracts? And any thoughts there, or do you think there will be more of a shift toward designating more rural zones? What are you guys both hearing?
I think it could vary state to state. Based on what each governor's office wants to focus on, and where their developable census tracts are located. I mean, a state like, say, Missouri, where Jason Smith is a very prominent member of Congress from that state, who has a very strong focus on rural opportunity zones, had actually introduced a separate rural opportunity zone incentive over the past couple of years. And so, that state, very, very Republican state, may have a focus more on the rural areas. I think it's going to vary state to state. I'd be interested to hear what Catherine thinks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think while we're pointing out, in our guidance, certainly the stronger benefits for rural. I mean, I think it will very much depend state by state. We want every state to obviously operate with the full understanding and kind of full information, as they're making their decisions. But for some states, it may just make sense, again, if they're thinking about their own vision for the state, if they're thinking about, their economic development priorities, that, maintaining kind of more of a concentration in urban or kind of small mid-tier cities and those markets may continue to make sense, and less so on the rural side. But yeah, there are other states where, I think, and we saw this even in Colorado the first time around, even absent, stronger incentives for rural, that they really felt strongly about wanting to put the vast majority of their OZ designations in more rural areas. That worked out really well for them, but they saw as of 2020, they saw 75% of their OZ zones had gotten investments. But that was also because they layered on very intentionally other, technical assistance programs, because they knew rural places are going to have less capacity in understanding this and making this work than metro areas. And so they made sure that those places had technical assistance. They had marketing materials. They had other support from the state that they could give, to really kind of boost investment in those places. So I think if a state decides to do that, like it would be smart to think through other ways in which, the state could be supportive, of those strategies. And that really goes for urban or rural kind of placement of zones. But so yeah, we'll be interesting to see what happens.
Agreed. Well, we're just about out of time. Sean, I see your question about legacy opportunity funds. An anonymous attendee asked a question about what does substantial improvement 100% versus 50% look like. I'm going to answer those questions. Those are both technical questions I can answer in the Q&A module or in the chat momentarily during our next presentation. Before we sign off, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about each one of your groups. Catherine, I'll start with you. The Economic Innovation Group essentially was the group that created opportunity zones in the first place. They first conceptualized the idea, and it was eventually packaged into tax legislation through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act a couple years later. So we're really grateful to have you here today. Can you tell us a little bit more about, just in 1 minute or less, because we're already a little bit long on time, the EIG Opportunity Zone Coalition and what purpose that serves for the industry?
Sure, of course. Our coalition has been in place since 2018, shortly after the incentive passed, and really represents, we hope, is the full kind of spectrum of the market and those involved, from of course, investors and fund managers to community-based organizations, community leaders and practitioners, of course, the accountants and lawyers who help make sense of all of this for us. We've really coalesced around, I think, representing the industry and the stakeholder community on, what's working with OZs, what could be improved. That led to, and it has informed all of our efforts, regulatory kind of improvement legislation, obviously all of our work on with the co-sponsors and the congressional champions on the reconciliation bill this summer. So it will continue to play a very active role for us in kind of informing our regulatory work in phase 2. And so if you're interested, we'd be happy to chat more about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today, Catherine. And Jason, you're the chairman of the Novogradac Opportunity Zones Working Group. What the heck is that? How do I join it? We got a couple questions. How do I monitor what's going on in that OZWG? And tell us a little bit about the upcoming OZ Summit on the Las Vegas Strip on December 3rd.
Yeah, very, very excited about that. It's a full day summit. We have a bunch of great panels that are really going to dig a little deeper into some of the topics we've talked about today. That's December 3rd in Las Vegas on the Strip. Like you said, you could, if you want to register for that, Jimmy, are you able to provide a registration link? Or if not, I can forward that to you.
I will provide it right now. And I've also got a 10% off coupon code for everybody.
Yeah. So we're very excited about that. Going to be a very big crowd. The working group itself, it's really a collection of stakeholders in the OZ industry. A lot of practitioners, a lot of funds, opportunity zone businesses, and we meet regularly, sort of developing best practices and recommended practices, looking at technical issues, and then also advocating and proposing legislative and particularly regulatory solutions to some of the problems that we think could be resolved through a regulatory change or additional Treasury regulations. Like I mentioned earlier, we've already submitted one letter that addresses some of the immediate guidance that we think is necessary. We have a couple more letters on the way that are going to delve a little deeper into implementation and longer term policy type goals that we think could be impacted through a regulatory change.
Perfect. Well, thank you both, Catherine Lyons and Jason Watkins. I did just drop links to your LinkedIn profiles in the Zoom chat. I also dropped a link to the Novogradac OZ Summit coming to Las Vegas on December 3rd in the chat as well. Discount code OZ10 to save 10% on that. Thank you so much to both of you for participating on OZ Pitch Day. Really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, both of you.
Having us.